What if the skies of our ancient world were not as empty as we think? What if, thousands of years ago, long before the invention of airplanes or rockets, human beings, or perhaps someone else, had already mastered the art of flight? Picture this. A thunderous object roars across the heavens, crafted of shining metal, powered by a strange glowing energy, moving like a comet through the night. Not a science fiction film, not a dream, but a description found in sacred texts, written in a language older than most civilizations still standing. These are not metaphors. They are not vague symbols. They are blueprints, instructions, chronicles of machines that could fly, hover, and even engage in aerial warfare. They are called Vimanas, and they are one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in all of ancient history. Today, we open the files, the Vimana files, in the vast spiritual tapestry of ancient India, woven through verses of epic poetry and religious scripture, lies a series of descriptions so vivid, so technologically specific, that they continue to defy historical logic. These are not tales of gods alone. They are detailed accounts of flying vehicles, aerial battles, propulsion systems, and even interdimensional travel. The term Vimana appears throughout multiple ancient Indian texts, most notably the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the lesser-known but equally tantalizing Vaimanika Shastra. To dismiss these accounts as pure allegory would be to ignore the possibility that ancient cultures might have known or encountered something far beyond their time. The word Vimana itself translates loosely to measuring out or traversing, but over the centuries it has come to mean flying chariot or aerial vehicle. In the epic Ramayana, the Pushpaka Vimana is described as a magnificent flying palace, capable of transporting multiple passengers, adjusting its size at will, and moving through the skies at the command of its pilot. It was said to be owned first by Kubera, the god of wealth, and later seized by the demon king Ravana. The descriptions are eerily specific. This was not a winged animal or a floating cloud. It was a machine, a structured, engineered, metallic construct capable of flight. And then there is the Mahabharata. This sprawling epic of over 200,000 lines does not just recount tales of heroism and virtue. It also speaks of blinding lights in the sky, chariots that roar like thunder, and weapons that sound disturbingly modern. One verse describes a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. It explodes with the brightness of 1,000 suns. The earth shakes. Trees are uprooted. Birds fall dead from the sky. Radiation, perhaps? Or merely metaphor? Skeptics call it exaggeration. But those with an open mind might ask, could this be a nuclear explosion, witnessed and recorded by an ancient civilization? The most controversial of all sources is the Vaimanika Shastra, allegedly written by the sage Bharadvaja. It surfaced in the early 20th century under mysterious circumstances, claimed to be a transcription of a far older text. This manuscript outlines detailed schematics of flying machines, including instructions on how to build and operate them. It mentions 31 parts of the vehicle, including a pilot's chamber, engines, gear systems, and something akin to radar. There is even a section on the mental discipline required to pilot such craft, suggesting a link between consciousness and machine, an idea now being explored at the forefront of artificial intelligence and brain-computer interfaces. One model described is the Rukma Vimana, said to be shaped like a disc made of golden-colored metal and driven by rotating gyroscopic engines fueled by a liquid that resembles mercury. The resemblance to modern descriptions of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, is uncanny. Another model, the Tripura Vimana, is a literal flying city, equipped with living quarters, defense systems, and the ability to move between land, water, and air. A mobile fortress in the sky. These are not casual myths. These are engineering blueprints presented in ancient poetic form. Some historians argue that such descriptions are simply spiritual metaphors, that the flying chariots are allegories for enlightenment, not aircraft. But that explanation grows thin when you read the level of technical detail in these texts. It is as if someone attempted to describe an airplane to a pre-industrial society using the only language they had: myth, poetry, and metaphor. In doing so, they encoded knowledge that may have been forgotten or deliberately hidden. And that brings us to a darker question. If such machines did exist, where did they come from? Were they created by ancient Indian civilizations whose knowledge was lost in a great cataclysm, like the floods described in so many cultures? Or were they the product of something not of this world? This is where the ancient astronaut theory gains traction. Popularized by the series Ancient Aliens, this theory suggests that gods described in ancient texts were not divine at all, but extraterrestrials wielding advanced technologies so powerful that it appeared godlike to primitive humans. In this view, Vimanas were not metaphysical chariots. They were spacecraft. The beings that piloted them were not mythological figures, but visitors, perhaps colonizers, perhaps allies, perhaps something in between. Some even argue that the wars fought between gods in Indian epics were not symbolic battles of good versus evil, but literal wars between factions of advanced beings, using technologies that humanity would not reinvent for another 10,000 years. It is not just literature that supports these theories. Archaeological anomalies add fuel to the fire. In places like Ellora and Ajanta caves, you find megalithic architecture so precise, so advanced, that modern tools would struggle to replicate it. Massive temples carved directly out of mountain rock, aligned with celestial patterns, built without any written construction plans. Who were the architects? What guided their hands? Could it be that they were imitating, or perhaps being instructed by, beings with far greater knowledge? Then there is the Iron Pillar of Delhi, a structure over 1,600 years old, made of a form of iron so pure that it has not rusted despite centuries of rain, wind, and pollution. No modern metallurgist has been able to recreate its exact composition using ancient techniques. Is this evidence of lost technology or borrowed technology? Skeptics, of course, push back. They argue that texts like the Vaimanika Shastra are modern forgeries, that their scientific claims do not hold up under scrutiny, and that the entire narrative is a patchwork of spiritual metaphor and wishful thinking. But one must ask, why would ancient peoples describe flying machines at all? Why would they use such strange detail, such technical language, unless they were trying to preserve real knowledge? Some modern engineers have tried to reconstruct Vimana designs using the specifications found in these ancient texts. Most have failed due to the vagueness or impossibility of some ingredients. Others, however, claim partial success, especially when it comes to the idea of mercury-based propulsion, a concept that appears not just in Indian texts, but in Egyptian and Mesopotamian accounts as well. Even Nazi scientists during World War II investigated Vril energy and mercury engines, drawing inspiration from esoteric Indian manuscripts. Coincidence or suppressed history? What makes the Vimana mystery even more intriguing is its universality. Similar accounts of flying chariots, thunderbirds, sky shields, and fire wheels appear in the myths of nearly every ancient civilization. The Chinese speak of the dragons that flew in the heavens. The Mayans worshipped gods who descended in fiery crafts. The Greeks wrote of golden chariots pulled by winged horses, which may have been metaphors for jets. And in the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel describes a flying object with wheels within wheels, glowing metal, and beings inside, an account that sounds eerily like a modern UFO sighting. Why is this archetype so persistent, so global? Did every culture just happen to imagine the same thing, the same way, at the same time? Or is there a deeper truth waiting to be acknowledged? And if these technologies once existed, then where did they go? Were they destroyed in ancient wars? Hidden in underground chambers, like those rumored to exist beneath the Sphinx or in the Himalayas? Or have they been preserved by secret societies, by governments, or perhaps even by descendants of the beings who first brought them here? The implications are staggering. If Vimanas were real, then history as we know it is incomplete. Our narrative of human evolution, of technological progress, of cultural development, must be rewritten. It would mean that we are not the peak of civilization, but rather a second act, a revival after a forgotten golden age. And perhaps that is why so many mainstream scholars resist the idea. Because it changes everything. It means that religion, myth, and science are not separate disciplines but different lenses through which to view the same phenomenon. It means that the divine might be technological, that the mythological might be historical, that the impossible might just be the forgotten. So what do we do with this knowledge? We question, we investigate, we imagine. We look at the ancient world not as a primitive sandbox, but as a complex web of encoded knowledge, fractured memories, and buried truths. We re-examine the texts, the ruins, the legends, not as fiction, but as testimony. And we ask ourselves not just what happened, but why it was hidden. The Vimana files remain open. They challenge us to expand our definitions of what is real, what is ancient, and what is possible. They remind us that in the vast ocean of time, we are not the first to dream of the skies. Perhaps we are not even the first to touch them. And if that is true, then somewhere, beneath the dust of empires, behind the veils of scripture, and beyond the stars, there may yet be answers. Answers that we were never meant to find.